move beyond that. We haven't really seen them come out too much in terms of labeling countries like Canada, like France, etc., and UK, and calling for attacks on those countries. So it's a little bit unusual in that regard, but it does follow the narrative that ISIS has followed, that Al-Qaeda has followed, and they're trying to, lift up their game and move beyond a regional threat. And we know we have had Canadians and Americans travel abroad to Somalia to fight with Al-Shabaab, and so that really is the linkage there that's of some concern. In terms of sheer size, West Edmonton Mall is the largest mall, of course, in Canada. It's probably the best known, or amongst the top 2 or 3 best known malls, most successful malls in the country. So I'm not really surprised. And there is some linkage, of course, between West Edmonton Mall and the Mall of America in terms of previous ownership and different things. So I'm not surprised they've named that particular mall. At the same time, I think really it's all malls. The idea here is that they would call for attacks against malls, because malls are where many people gather. It's a part of our life. And we don't want to be concerned going to malls, and the terrorist groups want to impact upon that and want to make people feel concerned going to places like malls. Well, there's a wide range of defensive measures that malls can take, and many malls have lifted up their security since 9/11, and then since the more recent ISIS threats and just the terror threat changing. So there are really a few things. The first thing is we want to prevent. So what you'll see is the camera system, for example, used much more proactively to identify abnormal behaviors. Perhaps reconnaissance missions done by terrorist groups that may come into the mall ahead of time to plan something. The mall security staff tend to be much better trained now. The shopping center security groups and industry associations have training now for mall security for a number of years, training them to be more observant for the kind of indicators that could portend attention from not just terrorist groups, but organized crime and criminals as well. So that's some of the things that you're going to see. You're also going to see a much tighter intelligence gathering between the police and their information and the mall. If the malls see things that are unusual, the tenants or the security staff, they'll be reaching out to the police, and you'll see probably a very tight connection between the law enforcement authorities across Canada, in my view, and these malls, in terms of just understanding, being on the same page, and sharing information about possible threats that could manifest against that mall. Well, it can be a challenge, and that's one of the reasons why malls fall within that soft target definition, which is a target that's fairly hard to protect. And it's not a government installation or one where you would have military and police guarding the mall. And obviously we don't want to move to that kind of a situation here in Canada, nor North America. So obviously what we really need to have is very vigilant malls that have good, well-trained security people. They're using their camera system appropriately to make sure they're watching for behaviors of concern. The tenants and the tenant staff are engaged in this as well. But yeah, malls can be a challenge to protect. And it really is, in that environment, you have to enlist all of the support. And even what I'm seeing down the road here in Canada is that we have a very inwardly facing kind of national threat profile here. When the government puts the threat level higher or lower, they don't tell the public. It just kind of, it's an internal system. My view is that as we look at these kind of threats that have been coming, that the Canadian public will be more engaged in that kind of discussion. They'll know that the threat level may have increased, and they'll be asked to contribute if they see things of concern, if they see a behavior that may be aberrant or different. They should be calling the authorities and letting them know that they're seeing something unusual. I don't think we need to be panicky or nervous here, but I do think that we're seeing a threat level that's gradually increasing, and the Canadian public may need to be harnessed in the fight against terrorism in this country. Well, there's no imminent threat that the authorities are aware of, and in the circles that I work in. There's nothing that we believe is imminent or about to change the level of threat at the West Edmonton Mall, for example. I think what this really signals is a need for the authorities and malls in general to look at what they're doing for security, and just being aware that they need to have a very thorough program that actually prevents and is proactive and spots identifiers, as well as is being responsive if we have something happen. But in terms of the public, I think the message here would be that there's no reason to think that there's imminent plots or plans in place here. Al-Shabaab Central does not have the resources and infrastructure to commit such an act. They're trying to encourage radicalized Canadians who may have gone abroad. And what we know about that is that there's a very small number, perhaps about a dozen or so Canadians that have gone over to Somalia and that region to join Al-Shabaab, many of whom have been killed in battle. So I don't think there's a large threat here, But obviously it takes one person for a lone wolf attack, so we have to be on guard. I don't think the threat's imminent, and Edmontonians, in my view, don't need to be overly concerned at this time.